The views and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited.
Welcome to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with the panel. Your favorite, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today, again, our panel will be answering listener questions. Our question comes from Linda, and Linda lives in Phoenix, Arizona. And Linda is asking, what is going on in Canada? After the Trump comments, President-elect Trump's comments, it seems that Trudeau's party is abandoning him. Very good question, Linda. So, what do you both think?
Yeah, they do seem to be abandoning him. I honestly don't think it has anything to do with Trump's comments, to be honest. I think that he's been having some issues, under the radar. Because of course in Canada they're just nicer than we are, so it's just not out there on the forefront of things. And I think he's been having issues. His party's been having issues. I was in Calgary about 3 years ago. I was in a pub, and they were talking about Trudeau, and they all said he can never come to Calgary ever. Never come to Calgary because they hated him so much. So, I mean, it's divisive. And he's had his issues. They don't get to play in the American media as much as, of course, our own politics does for obvious reasons. But the fact is I don't think Trump's comments had anything to do with it. I think it really kind of pissed a lot of people in Canada off because they don't want to be Americans. Because they look at us and they say, yeah, I'll pass. I don't think I really want to do that.
So I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think that Cynthia Freeland is like ardent anti-Trumper, and Trudeau is doing his best to make a bad situation livable. And what she discovered or what she decided was that she doesn't want to be a part of that. So it's kind of like we're in the same position here where there are some people who are saying, you know what, if you can't beat them, join them. And let's play the game. And there are other people who are saying, you know what, I can't do this anymore. How it ends up, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know how Trudeau is going to replace her. I don't know if there's going to be, as another prominent Canadian leader said, a refusal for them to sell us energy anymore. And I think that it's really important for Americans to understand a couple of things about our country and this idea that we're energy independent that we've discussed on this podcast before, is that we are the number one supplier in the world of oil and gas. But we do not use any of that here because we don't have refineries that are built to refine the oil and gas that we drill here in America, which means that we can sell that to other people and use that money to buy energy from mainly Canada and Mexico. And that if they decide to shut us down in retaliation, there will be massive problems, shortages here. We can't build refineries quickly enough to use American energy at our own gas pumps, and Trump is playing with fire, but he seems to like playing with fire, and the American people seem to like it when he plays with fire. So be it. We'll have to see. I think bad things are coming. But I do believe that this has everything to do with Trump and very little to do with whatever other, and I don't know what they would be even, whatever problems that Canada has politically.
Well, and that's possible. That is possible. But as I say, Trudeau had trouble beforehand. He's not very popular in Canada. So, I mean, there was an undercurrent of vulnerability to him. And yeah, with Freeland resigning as the finance minister, yeah, it does put a lot of pressure onto him, and we'll see how he navigates it. Really, how that. I think the comments made by Scott is correct to the fact that Trudeau is trying to make the best of a bad situation. He's trying to take lemons and make some lemonade out of it. Granted. And Freeland's basically saying, I don't like lemonade. So I don't like lemons or lemonade. I don't want anything to do with it. But do not want to give Trump that much credit when it comes to Canadian politics, because Trump is as unpopular in Canada as Trudeau is. Trump is even more unpopular to the Canadians. And every time he opens his mouth and calls the Canadian Prime Minister governor, or that, again, it's a bad idea. And those very nice Canadians, we have a lot of listeners in Canada, those very nice Canadians really dislike Donald Trump. And they look at the selection of Donald Trump to the presidency this time around with as much scratching their heads as the Europeans do. But they also know that they're on our border. And there is a bit of political maneuvering that has to be made. But let's remember, yes, we are a large supplier of energy. They're the largest supplier of toilet paper. And we know what that means. Okay, maybe they won't have gas for their cars, but you'll be using sandpaper after a good constitutional. I don't want to give Trump that much credit when it comes to the decisions being made in Canada. I do believe that Trudeau was pretty much in trouble to begin with, and this is just another sign of it. I don't see anything more to it than that.
Yeah, Trudeau was unpopular ahead of time. And it is my understanding that the premiers, who are the individuals in charge of the various provinces, it's like a governor in the United States, they had wanted Trudeau to go to Mar-a-Lago to speak with Trump about tariffs and try to help Trump understand what a 25% tariff was going to mean. And where Trump insists that we in the United States are subsidizing Canada at $100 million a year, that is incorrect. The amount of trade deficit is approximately $65 million. And the reason we have a trade deficit with Canada is that the United States has 10 times the population size, and we have a lot more money. And what we buy from Canada is a lot more expensive, and there's a lot more of it than what we buy from them. So it speaks to our paying them in trade goods $65 million more than what they buy from us, the Canadians buy from us in the United States, speaks to the strength of our economy and the size of our population. It has nothing to do with subsidizing anybody. A subsidy is giving, like when Trump had tariffs in his first term administration that hurt farmers so badly that they had to be given government money to survive. That is a subsidy. That's giving out money. This is not a subsidy. This is buying trade goods, and we're buying minerals, we're buying lumber, we're buying toilet paper and eggs and all sorts of other goods that Canada has, and we buy a tremendous number of trade goods, and Canada buys less from us, and that's simply a fact. And unfortunately, when Trudeau came down to Mar-a-Lago, of course, he could not get Trump to understand what a tariff really was and what it would really mean. And Trump simply saw that as a weakness rather than as a conversation and as a diplomatic move. And the individual in the Premier of Ontario, who is Doug Ford, who had been what's called a maple MAGA, he was all for Trump and he really liked Trump, has now said that he will go as far as stopping the provision of power to New York State in the form of electricity, for instance, if he has to, in order to make a point if the tariffs go into effect. And that would also affect Wisconsin and Michigan. And so what Trump is doing is uniting the premiers, who are, of course, very upset. And when a prime minister is being called a governor, which is very demeaning, and a sovereign nation is being called a state, which is also very demeaning, people, of course, are going to rally. They may not be rallying around Trudeau, but they're going to be rallying around their country. And what we in the United States, of course, what we're hearing now, and Canadians also are hearing is, Ontario first, Canada first. So two can play at the game that Trump is attempting, America first and all of that. And Trump is stirring up difficulty for the United States by saying whatever he wants to say or whatever he thinks people want to hear or whatever. I really don't know what of course I'm not inside his head and I don't know him personally, and I just cannot fathom what the purpose of his remarks are or what he thinks he's going to accomplish. And the fact that he cannot understand that by making remarks such as he is, the Canadians are going to unite behind their own flag. They may not unite under Trudeau, but they're going to unite within their own country and under their own flag. And the relationship between our two nations is likely to deteriorate, and it's not going to be because the Canadians made the first move. That's a responsive move to what Trump started, although Trump will, of course, and the Republicans will, of course, say, well, no, it was because of immigration across the northern border, which is negligible, and it was because of fentanyl, which is negligible. The amount of fentanyl seized at the northern border was 43 pounds, which is less than you'd put in a suitcase that you might put on an airplane of clothing in your suitcase to travel somewhere. It's negligible. So there's the damage that's going to be done to the United States and to international relations between our two countries is going to far outstrip any concerns about immigration or fentanyl. I cannot begin to fathom what the purpose of a tariff for Canada or for Mexico, for that matter. I think it's highly damaging. So, Scott, what did you want to say?
I think you mentioned that these are not subsidies, right? We're not subsidizing Canada. We're buying from them, and we buy a lot. I think we buy more from them than we do any other country other than maybe Mexico. And for Canada, the United States is their biggest market, bigger than China's market, bigger than Japan, the UK, and France combined. These are independent countries that are very tied together by trade. The first time through, Trump didn't like NAFTA, called it the worst deal ever, put tariffs on aluminum and lumber or whatever, and they negotiated the USMCA deal, which Trump said was a great deal, and now is saying it's a terrible deal. It just, whatever it is that he's trying to do is just create disruption, which he's managed, right? At least in my opinion, that Freeland is out and another guy is in there doing the negotiating with him, and that it's going to raise costs here, even though Trump is going to tell his people, and they'll probably believe him, that it's not. that it's an illusion. You're not actually paying more for toilet paper, let's say, or gasoline, or that if you are, that it's not his fault, it's somehow Biden's fault, or whatever it is. But it is not going to lead us to a good place. I suppose if you can get away with it in terms of causing pain to people but blaming it on other people, then I guess that's good for you. Certainly seems to be, right? Kamala Harris didn't get elected because of inflation. Well, now we know that a lot of that inflation was caused not by Biden putting money into other people's hands, right? Which is what the common wisdom was, because that didn't happen in European countries, and Asian companies, and they suffered the same kind of inflation that we had. And what it actually is because these tariffs ended the decades of cheap goods from China and other places that we really enjoyed having, and that was inflationary. And we're going to see that again before this is over. And probably Trudeau will be out by, let's say, October, I think is when they're going to hold their votes. And somebody else will be back in. It could be Cynthia Freeland. Right now, she's obviously out there on her own, but I believe she's still a member of their parliament. And so she's got a voice and a platform to oppose Trudeau's sort of sucking up to Trump. Disruption is the key, right? It's cruelty is the point. That's the agenda, and we're going to see that more and more. I don't know what else to say about this.
What occurred to me while you were speaking also is the dual nature of the pain or the devastation, really. If the deportations happen, and in the construction industry, for example, where individuals such as businesses in Texas have said that their companies will not survive because so many of their workers are undocumented, and we're importing lumber from Canada, and we don't have the capacity to replace that lumber to build new houses, and then we don't have the workforce to build them. So on the one hand, we're not going to have the lumber to build with, and we're not going to have the workmen to do the work. And there's already a housing shortage, and people were complaining about the costs of rent and the costs of housing. But homelessness has also now been made a crime. We can see where the situation in the United States is going as far as affordable housing is going, and where homelessness is also going, and where the crime of homelessness is also going to increase the rate of incarcerated individuals, presumably, and also the rates of deaths for people who are home insecure and who are without shelter.
Just one last thing. This is absurd, right? I'm just going to bring this up and just play along with me, if you will. Could we invade Canada and Mexico? Like he's mentioned it a few times, right? He's mentioned, using the army at the border, going across the border, mostly with Mexico, not so much with. I think there was even a point where he was saying, "Why don't we bomb Mexico, but blame it on somebody else?" If I'm not mistaken about that, that was the idea that he was touting.
I remember that. Yes, you're correct.
It seems to me like we're kind of, playing around with like best case scenarios, which are pretty horrible, but it really could end up being the end of this sort of like mostly peaceful democratic republic that we have here in the United States, and more towards an aggressive authoritarian dictatorship. And what are the end game possibilities there when it comes to, is it conceivable that we would literally invade our two closest neighbors?
Sure. I mean, I don't see why not, Scott. Really, to be honest. I mean, who knows what's I don't
Well,
see that
sanity would be why
impossible.
not, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean it's Canada scrapped their preparation plans for U.S. invasion only in 1959. That's how they've been prepared for a U.S. invasion up until then, and since then I don't know if they're going to revive their plans or not. I don't know that
wait,
much about Mexico.
hold on. Could you say that again?
Yes, up until 1959, Canada had counter invasion preparedness plans to repel an armed invasion from the United States, because we've invaded Canada before on more than one occasion. And only in, I believe it was 1959, were the plans dismantled and scrapped. I don't know if they were saved and put away and archived, but they were no longer active and kept current. And I believe that was 1959.
Oh, I got to check that out. That's interesting.
Hmm.
I never heard that before.
Yeah, I think it was that recent. Well, that's getting, in the rather long past, but it's fairly recent as far as longer history goes in the relationships between our two countries. Oh, I think it's quite possible. I mean, if floating the idea of bombing Montreal from a sitting member of Congress with apparently all seriousness. I mean, why would anybody even I mean that would just never cross, I would think, a balanced person's, a lawmaker's mind. What on earth would cause anybody to want to bomb Canada or Mexico for that matter? So yeah, I mean, if that's the caliber of thinking, and people who are involved with the Heritage Project and the 2025, is it Stephen Miller who wrote that? His undergraduate degree is in military history, so there tends to be, in some instances at least, a very aggressive approach, and I don't see that is really outside the realm of possibility. I mean, not given what we've been hearing, and the let's put this person in jail and let's execute that other person, and nothing is off the table type of thinking, and saying so in public.
Okay.
Mark, what do you see? What do you say? I see you making
I say no.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Not possible.
Well, anything's possible. The sun could not come up tomorrow. That's possible. But what would be the reason? What benefit do you get from that? And once again, you can invade a country. We've seen that happen so many times. That's the easy part. Holding on to it is the hard part.
What benefit is there from 25% tariffs on your allies?
Once again, now you're talking economics. What I'm talking about is invasion of a country. Once you take it over, we saw that in Iraq. We saw it in Afghanistan. Yeah, it's easy for us to go in and bomb and do whatever we're going to do. Now you got to hold on to it. And every single time we've had any kind of warfare where one country overtook another, the issue of taking it was the easy part. Holding on to it is the hard part. And yeah.
Well, there's invade and bomb and withdraw and just leave a mess behind.
Okay, for what purpose?
Cruelty and just showing that we can. Making an object lesson out of it, the same rationale as bombing Montreal, just to
hopefully we have not risen to that level of depravity.
Well, that was the reason given for bombing Montreal, just to make an object lesson.
Okay, that's one congressman who's an idiot. Okay, idiots will say stupid stuff. I don't hang my hat on it.
Well, I hope that you're right. Alrighty. So thank you very much for the question. We appreciate the question. That certainly sparked an interesting conversation. And we will see you again on the Nova Society.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of Nova Works, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, who is our editing partner, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. We'd also like to thank iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.